All right, welcome to Space Utilization Analytics for Workplaces. Today, we're going to talk about how space utilization data can enable a better workplace. My name is Ari Kepnes. I'm Director of Market Research at Density, and my role here is to understand how the workplace is changing and how data is a part of those changes. And I'm joined here today with Rob Grazioli. Rob is the head of product design here at Density. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about who we are, introduce ourselves here at Density. We're going to talk about the importance of utilization data. Then I'm going to hand off to Rob to give an analytics presentation. We're in two different places, so we're going to hopefully be able to handle that seamlessly. And after that, we're going to end with a Q&A. Quick note about the Q&A. There is a Q&A button. It should be at the bottom or the top of your screen of your Zoom application. As we are going through the presentation, you're encouraged to please leave a question, and you can do so anonymously or not. At the end of the presentation, which will be about 20 minutes or so, we will then go to the Q&A section. So thank you for that in advance. So we are Density. Density was founded in 2014 with some team members from former Microsoft Connect, people on the supply chain for Apple, as well as SAP. We are funded by investors that also fund Facebook, SpaceX, Uber, and a number of other companies in San Francisco where we're based. And Density is the new data platform for the connected workplace. And we enable that through our people counting technology. We allow organizations to measure efficiency between their two largest assets, people and corporate real estate. On the right is an image of the hardware technology, which we'll be talking about, so the second half of today's presentation. We are also working with some of the largest Fortune 500 companies, and some of the things that we do is we help those clients make data-driven decisions, which we'll be talking about today. Here's a quote from Noel. We also work with a number of large Fortune 100 companies across industries, in telecom, in tech. Some of them include Verizon and LinkedIn, and a number of other companies across different sectors. So today we're going to talk about Goldilocks. So if you're here for utilization, then you're the wrong top place. Just kidding here, but Goldilocks is kind of a funny and an important metaphor for today's conversation. So why is that? Why is Goldilocks an interesting kind of metaphor? It's because that in this search for the right size bed or the right temperature porridge that Goldilocks goes through, it's not an easy task for her. She has to go through different things. She has to kind of experience it all, test different things, and then she finally comes across the right size bed or the right experience for her. And it's not an easy thing. And it's kind of this trial and error approach. And to get there, there's a lot of feedback between her and her environment. So that's kind of a fun little segue there. But the overall takeaway is that it's kind of this empathetic tale that we can see that trying to get the right size, trying to get the right experience in real estate is not easy. The reason why is that effective workplaces have to do this really complex balancing act between the employee experience and cost efficiency. And so what that means is that on one hand, there's need to care about how employees use space and what they need and what the amenities they need to be supported, right? So there's a huge shift in this, and it's almost this hospitality feel. On the other hand, over half of corporate real estate execs are still caring about and care about portfolio costs and shrinking space, shrinking and reducing things that are not used. So there's this weird tension in our field today between efficiency and experience. And we've seen that this kind of perennial balancing act has not been resolved historically. So because of that, you're seeing that in every decade that seems to be driven by a new fad that isn't actually related to kind of a Goldilocks approach of collecting data on what actual employees need in their environment and then responding to that with an iterative approach. Instead, there's these large swaths of shifts. Now, I'm in no way against the open office, but I do believe that what we've seen from research is that it works only when there's a variety of spaces that meet specific needs of employees. And that search for the right side real estate is in full swing. So the way to resolve that is through space utilization. And space utilization today is a key metric for balancing conflicting needs, that tension between experience and efficiency. And we know this because 83% of corporate real estate execs are seeing space utilization as a top metric for decision-making. That was collected by Gensler. And what I mean here is that this is data about how space is used. How are people interacting with the environment, and how does that data drive decisions? So that's the overall theme for today in that Goldilocks context. So at a high level, there's 3 core benefits of space utilization. One is to reduce costs, because there's this huge mindset today around portfolio costs being something that needs to be reduced. And in order to do that, you have to know what space you actually don't need. You have to be able to understand what's underutilized. And so that is allowed through understanding what people actually use. The second is around simplifying space planning. So you need to have a holistic approach and be able to use space utilization to actually understand across a portfolio, how do I know what I need and what I don't? Well, I look at how people and space are interacting. And then the third is about validating needs. So this is going to be a theme when Rob talks a little bit about specific different clients that we have, but this idea that, employees are always asking for things, but to know what they're actually using and they're voting with their feet for what they actually need, that drives a lot of these decisions. So today we have this issue of underutilization and unmet needs. So on one hand, 40% of all corporate real estate is empty but paid for. That's huge. That's from CBRE, and there's another report too that backs that up. And then almost 90% of corporate real estate executives are not satisfied with how they're using space at their company. On the other hand, besides underutilization and in terms of actual sizing or using space, employees are not that happy. So when they're not happy, they will leave. And it's becoming the strategic initiative to keep employees through corporate real estate. And so 67% of workers attributed their reason for leaving of having to do partly with the workplace not being suited for their needs. So I'm going to now hand it off to Rob, who is going to show how this importance of space utilization actually enables a data-driven workplace that delivers on both experience and efficiency.
Awesome. Thank you, Ari. So I'll take it from here. And so what I'm going to do today is really go through a couple different levels of analytics, ways that we use that we help customers improve space allocation, as Ari mentioned, handle requests, manage more high traffic spaces. So there are different space types. A really common one's conference rooms, but you have emergence of cafes and stuff like that. And then at a high level, go over how we're working with some customers for high-level portfolio management, and I'll give you a little sneak preview of some of what we're working on there. So I think a really common request is for more space in our industry, and no one likes to be the bad guy and really deny those requests. So it becomes paramount to display utilization data in a way that's really consumable, actionable, and can create a dialogue that ultimately results in better space. And we have a big financial institution using density to help handle some space requests from growing teams. And basically what they did was they converted a series of what were old spaces dedicated for like one person, basically an office or your old school offices. And they turned those into team spaces and allocated them towards an emerging labs team. And that labs team was requesting more space. And at first glance, some of these spaces looked like they were being used improperly. We see this a lot for group type spaces where you have sort of your stand-ups or your big meetings where everyone sort of huddles together in the morning, plans out the week or plans out the day. So great, like they're using some of these rooms properly. However, a lot of the other spaces looked a lot like this. And what you're seeing here is one or two people are sort of occupying these big spaces. And these spaces could fit anywhere from 10 to 15 people. So that one size fits all strategy, it turns out wasn't really working for them. And ultimately what they were able to do was carve out additional rooms with their existing space. So you avoid having to move teams around or to explore additional space. In this case, the space that everyone needed was there. It's just that it hadn't been allocated properly, and they didn't have the data to make a decision up front to give people what they needed. So from here on out, they're going to continue to monitor more spaces and ensure that employees are getting what they need. So as you move up like the space hierarchy, let's say, a lot of times you have higher traffic areas and a trending space type, or cafes or food areas for employees. And previously, they would sort of set these static benchmarks for how many people would show up to these spaces. And that just results in food waste. It results in overstaffing or poor scheduling, and ultimately a really bad employee experience. What we've been able to do is segment these things by time frame and give people a really accurate picture of their space, and that allows them to plan accordingly. But more importantly, we're actually able to run predictive algorithms against this data, and not only tell them what it was like last week, but what it's going to be like next week. So you can imagine the kind of dividends that starts to pay off, especially when you discover that on Fridays only 25% of the people that were supposed to show up are actually showing up. That translates into serious cost savings from a staffing perspective, from a food waste perspective, and of course from an employee perspective, which is what we're starting to explore even more, which is not only giving workplace people the ability to manage these spaces, but also exposing this data to the employees themselves. So one of the unique aspects of density is that within a second, you can have the real-time count of any given space. So you can expose this to employees, and you can sort of balance your traffic more easily. So now I'm going to transition over to some of our high-level initiatives. So we're working with some of our largest customers with bigger portfolios to manage. Basically what we realize is at this scale, it's really important to understand your geography. So we're allowing people to sort of contextualize their spaces within a map. We're also looking at ways to create metrics that allow people to assess their spaces equally. As we touched on previously, like spaces and utilization, that relationship's kind of sketchy, and different metrics are relevant for different types of spaces. So we're sort of opening the door to again, geographic-based information, allowing people to sort of compare utilization metrics geographically and make decisions based on their geography. So let's say one building is proximate to another, it's being used less. You have two buildings right next to each other not being used a lot. That might be an opportunity for consolidation. But growth's a factor here. Collaboration and productivity is a factor here as well. So if you're interested in sort of participating in our early beta here, please send us an email after the fact, and we'd be happy to work with you more closely. That wraps the product demo. Back to you, Ari.
Great. So I'm just going to share my screen again, and we will be right on our way. All right. So just a few quick things about Rob's presentation there. Rob, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that when people think about space utilization, they typically think of someone going around with clipboards and measuring how is this space being used or not, or just some of the pattern data badge swipes. But as you can see, there's room level decisions, there's floor level and large space areas that are being made, and then there's building level and portfolio decisions. And that's all happening on a time scale of either real-time data or historical data as well as predictive. So it's really cool to see this kind of next wave of utilization in a way that we haven't seen it before. And so just a quick note here, when we think about space utilization and we talk about these terms, it can be hard to actually think about what does this actually mean in terms of collecting the data and how do you do it? So what you're looking at here is that people are weird, that people do weird things in physical space, and it makes getting this data really hard, right? They hide beneath hinges, they walk in different directions, they carry objects with them. And these are all feeds of what happens at work. And because of that, it's very hard to get accurate utilization data. Now, some people say, oh, maybe you can check a calendar of a room booking app. But that really isn't reflecting actually in real time and accurately how are people using spaces, and how are they actually voting with their feet for what they need and moving in a way that you can respond to. And so a big challenge here is to be able to count spaces effectively. And then with an understanding of count, you can understand how people are using the space. Now, our approach has been a machine learning approach, meaning that in order to do what I mentioned and to be able to accurately count people and understand how they're using space, we took a machine learning approach, which can actually find and detect human objects. So it can find an entrance and an exit in a field and then not count anything else. Now, when you look at this, one thing that kind of sticks out is that obviously these people are blurred. Another huge requirement of workplace analytics is a respect towards privacy. And so while cameras can be used for surveillance for entrances, to actually get utilization data in a sensitive environments, you have to be able to both accurately but also anonymously count how people are using space. So that's something that we spent 4 years trying out different products, working with different teams and driving results. And what we came to was this approach of around machine learning. So actually being able to, with computer vision, be able to detect human entrances and exits. And that brought us to density. And density, we have these devices that are installed on every entryway that is relevant to the count and what you're trying to measure. And it allows for both real time, which was a requisite of a lot of the decisions that Rob mentioned, accurate as well as anonymous. And there's things out there that can collect types of utilization data, but to scale across a workplace with these type of decisions, we've really been working on, and we've established kind of this product that we're super excited about, that we've had in the field with different customers. And what kind of a final note about density and how it all ties it together, right? You've seen the need for utilization. You've seen how Rob showed that at work. And we're able to deliver a analytics platform by counting entrances and exits on an entryway level that's both anonymous and accurate. And then we're integrating it too, and this is becoming more and more important, into different systems, because there's many different systems at work, and you can now integrate that data into the systems that you use to drive more results. And so the 3 takeaways today that I'd like to leave everyone with are that, first off, all roads begin with data. So whatever large decision you want to make, it's important to know what kind of data that you have to make better decisions. So it starts there. It's that simple. And as simple as counting, right? And then the second is to start with a discrete project. Now, when we talk about space utilization, you hear about CRE tech trends, and it can feel overwhelming, right? There's a lot of different decisions that Rob touched on. But what we found is that clients that have started with a specific problem, whether it's how many conference rooms, whether a growth initiative, a consolidation initiative, they start with a project, and then they're able to use data to help get them through. And then the last is that people are not ones and zeros. So we've talked a lot about data, utilization metrics. We've taken kind of this, there's a cold comfort to hard numbers, right? But it's important not to forget the employee after all of this, and to actually understand that these are people, and that this type of data really is there to enrich their experience, and they should not be left behind in this. That it's a process of involving multiple parties and putting employees at the center. So that wraps up the presentation portion here. So we are now going to jump to a Q&A. So please, at the bottom or the top of your screen, you can click on that Q&A icon, that Q with a folder, and submit your questions. And Rob will be moderating this part.
Cool. So please, take a minute. If you have questions, fill them in. We do have a few already. So I'll start to answer those, and I'll just sort of publicly state them, and then myself or Ari will look to address them as best we can. And if we can't, we can get your contact information and follow up later. So one of the first QA questions that came in is what hardware is collecting the data. Um, uh, I hope we addressed that, but again, Density builds or has designed and built a fully integrated device. All of the calculations, the algorithmic calculations are done on the device, and again, we're analyzing completely anonymous data. All that is then sent up to our cloud, and we present that data to you through our analytics platform. This looks great for tracking utilization of enclosed areas. How do you manage and track open areas, both open seating and workstations? Density is threshold based. We have used it to track open areas by essentially creating abstract thresholds, but we are aware of the limitations there, and we're actually actively looking to develop an open area version of our product. Okay, tell us about the infrastructure needed to be installed and use this tool. We've sort of designed installation from the bottom up. The device is PoE capable. Is powered by PoE and is both Ethernet and Wi-Fi capable. Customers have used like 4G networks to keep it off of their own network, but it also easily or behaves quite normally on your own network, and does not send up a lot of data. It just sends up ones and zeros. I hope that answers that question pretty well. Lots of questions here, so bear with me. What is machine learning, and how do you record a count? So again, machine learning is really just a fancy way of saying we wrote a script or an algorithm that essentially analyzes people moving through that threshold, and can, the same way a human could, spot what a person is as opposed to like what a door is or what a chair is, and then watches that person go through a threshold. If it's successful, it tells our server that a count just happened. How do you let EEs know about data gathering exercise? Do they feel much like Big Brother is watching? So again, this is definitely top of mind for us, and a big reason why we took a privacy first approach to designing and developing this product. I think a lot of employees now are very much aware of monitoring, and they simply don't like to be tracked. We are very public about how private we are, about how we handle our data, and are looking to adhere to every international standard to keep people's data private. We also don't collect any personally identifiable data. So in no way could an employee ever be identified.
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in. If you're worried about privacy, then we want to talk to you, because we have specifically designed this solution so that with privacy in mind, and not collect any anonymous or anything that is not anonymous, so no personal information at any point. And we are GDPR compliant, and we are super enthusiastic about the people who want to be sensitive with their employees' data and not be tracking in every space. And so we can be installed anywhere, even in a bathroom, because we don't know who anyone is. And that helps collect data in that way that is respective of those needs.
Cool, thank you, Ari. So another question, what mechanism are you using to connect to IWMS or CFAM systems? Is it just a data dump, or is it just utilization numbers into the systems? Or they're sharing a floor plan layout to ensure the right rooms are captured. So it can be a combination of those things. We actually have an API. It's one of our most highly touted products. It's really easy to use, and you can integrate it yourself into platforms. We also have some out of the box platforms with some IWMS systems. Some people like to just utilize our data dump functionality, so you can export all of your data as a CSV. And we do work with customers to sort of craft that data for their needs, as well as work with customers to ensure that their floor plans are totally covered, and that the data that they're getting is in fact accurate. someone mentioned, good, accurate, measurable, validated data is different than just data, and we couldn't agree more. So we spend a lot of time working with the customer to sort of demonstrate how accurate our data really is. And I think that just gives people a lot of confidence when they're making decisions. Is it battery / IP functional? So it's not battery powered. It's wall powered, or can be powered via switch with PoE. IP functional. I'm not exactly sure what that's asking, but it connects to the internet in a variety of ways, and it's pretty easy to actually add to your network. Do we have teams that come to sites and install the hardware? We do provide consultation and support. However, we've sort of done all of the above and worked with people's internal teams or trusted vendors. We've worked with external vendors, but mostly we're pretty hands off. The hardware's fairly easy to install, and we've worked with customers to get the right solution for them.
Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt you, Rob.
Sure.
So I love that there's all of these questions, and I am also very excited that there's a lot that are related to our solution specifically. I think our goal for this conversation is to start the conversation, and if you have specific questions about whether or not our technology solution is right for you, that's the perfect thing to get in touch with us and our team, who can guide through and understand all of these different ways and see if it's a good fit or not. I do want to take one last very general question that I think is important and relevant for people across the board, and then we'll wrap up here. The last question that we are going to take is, what has been our experience with the level of precision expectations relative to client needs? Meaning, are clients expecting too much or not enough from these platforms in terms of developing actionable data? That's a great question. I think that it really depends on the decision that people are trying to make. It's not as simple as getting all of the, I think where people don't have the right expectations sometimes is thinking that all utilization data is utilization data. And it's another thing they can just check off. And if they've checked that off, whether it's through people going around with clipboards or through other types of sensors, then they're good. And then from there, they can make decisions. So I think the expectations about that have been is something that need to be more refined to the specific problem that you're trying to solve. And then what are your needs in terms of respecting things like accuracy and anonymity, and then the business results that you need. So on that note, I would love to continue the conversation with all of you. And I want to thank you all for your time. Again, we will be following up with both the recording and with the gift card for the people that met the requirements at the beginning that I mentioned. And we're really excited to have you all here. And we understand that space utilization has become this big buzzword, and we want to make it something that is more understandable and is going to make your jobs easier. So please reach out. And again, thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your week.